Hey listeners, it's Jen. Welcome back to season 6 of What Are You Listening To? Shlancha and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm back this week with another WAYLT time capsule episode. In case you haven't guessed, this week's playlist is going to feature songs to add to your St. Patrick's Day rotation. Before we begin, I'm going to make my weekly plea for you to continue sharing your comments, feedback, suggestions, and of course, all of your song recommendations. I've loved reading each and every one of your notes, so please keep the emails coming at jen@superawesomemix.com. That's Jen with 2 N's at superawesomemix.com. For those of you that haven't listened to a WAYLT time capsule episode yet, it's exactly what it sounds like. Time capsule episodes consist of bits and pieces, thoughts and emotions in the form of songs that are meant to evoke a certain time, place, or life phase. I'm going to bring you a 4-song playlist like always, but time capsule episodes are not interview style. They are simply meant to create a vibe or mark an audio moment in time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. As I mentioned in the intro, this week's playlist is going to be made up of songs to help you celebrate St. Patrick's Day. I've tried to mix this week's playlist with some traditional Irish music, an old school favorite Irish band, spoiler alert, it's not U2, and some newer tracks from Irish artists that I love. Which songs made the cut? You're about to find out. And as you listen, if any of these songs are new to you, don't worry. We'll publish a playlist with the episode so you don't miss a beat. All right, let's get to it. Before we get to the music today, let's start with some lore. St. Patrick's Day is a holiday that has a lot of different meanings for a lot of different people. So I thought, let's just back it up and see what the traditional meaning of St. Patrick's Day is. So, St. Patrick's Day is typically celebrated on March 17th, and it honors St. Patrick, who is the patron saint of Ireland. St. Patrick was kidnapped in the late 4th century when he was 16 and taken to Ireland as a slave. After escaping, he returned to Ireland around 432 to convert the Irish to Christianity. And this is where the story gets interesting, and I think sort of the lore that most of us know about St. Patrick's Day. The story goes that St. Patrick drove all the snakes into the sea after they attacked him during a 40-day fast he was undertaking on top of a hill. Now, what we know today is that scientists and historians agree that there were never any snakes in Ireland, primarily due to its cold climate and isolation since the Ice Age. But the legend is likely a metaphor for St. Patrick's efforts to convert the Irish from paganism to Christianity. In pre-Christian Ireland and in lots of ancient cultures, the serpent was a symbol of spiritual power used by druids and pagans. The myth of Patrick banishing snakes represents his mission to displace these ancient beliefs and spread Christianity across Ireland. So, this tale, while not biologically accurate, speaks to the broader theme of transformation and spiritual conquest, which is a significant part of St. Patrick's legacy. So, even though the holiday began as a religious feast day in the 17th century, it has evolved into more of just a celebration of general Irish culture that Irishmen and women and non-Irish alike take part in. So that's the lore, the official story around St. Patrick's Day. But here are some today I learned, some TILs while I was researching St. Patrick's Day. The first thing, which you would think I would know this because I've been told this story since I was a child, I probably just erased it from memory at some point, but St. Patrick wasn't actually Irish. He was born in Roman Britain, likely in the late 4th century, and his birth name was Maewyn Succat. So, interesting little tidbit there. Another thing that I learned in doing research for this show is that blue was originally associated with St. Patrick, not green. So, that is a new development that it switched to green instead of blue. Next, another fun fact, despite the pubs being completely packed on St. Patrick's Day in the modern world, it was until the 1970s that Irish law required pubs to close on March 17th to preserve the day's religious significance. And now, dear listeners, I'm going to hit you with a fun fact that I've been a trick that I've been pulling since the early 90s is that on St. Patrick's Day, you always go to a Mexican restaurant, and on Cinco de Mayo, you always go to a pub. And that, my friends, is how you avoid the crowds. You can still go out and get your party on and not have to wait behind everyone else. So I like to flip the locations of those two holidays so that I'm always having a good time and never doing it with the masses. So there you go. Little tidbit from me to you. The last little fun fact that I will share before we get into the music: St. Patrick was never actually canonized by the church during his lifetime. So, another fun fact tidbit about St. Patrick's Day that you can wow your friends with at trivia tonight. Well, now that we have all the lore down, let's get to the music. We are going to kick today's playlist off with a relatively new Irish band that I love. They were featured a few seasons back, I believe, when I had Robert Neff on the show. He brought me a Fontaines D.C track, and I have been in love with them ever since. So, my first pick for our St. Patrick's playlist today is by the Irish band Fontaines D.C, and it's a song called Favorite. Now, the song is off their Romance album, which released in August of last year. Fontaines DC is an Irish post-punk band that formed in Dublin around 2014. So they've been around for just over 10 years, but I wasn't really familiar with them until their third album, which was called Skinty Fia, and that kind of broke them to U.S. audiences. At least that's sort of where I discovered them, and where most of the people that I know discovered them. So now that I'm a fan, I have gone back and listened to those first two albums and some of the early singles that they put out independently. All worth diving into. All good. But if you want to sort of ease your way into Fontaines DC, I would say maybe start with this Romance album, then go into Skinty Fia, and then you can start digging if you're finding yourself liking them. But I think that this is such a creative band. In some ways, they remind me of older bands like Psychedelic Furs or Simple Minds, but with an updated sensibility for 2025. I love that about them. And I think that that's another thing that continues to pull me in as I fall deeper into the rabbit hole of this band. I would also say, too, that when you're listening to this one, specifically this song, read the lyrics at least once. Like the phrasing and dialect are interesting. This band met and bonded over a shared love of poetry. So the lyrics are worth a read. I think that if you know that going in, you can appreciate those lyrics even more. That's something that this band found in common. So I think that their writing style really reflects that. So it is worth giving their lyrics at least a read once. And then if you want to just listen to the music and have fun, you certainly can. But I do recommend giving them a read. They also just released a new single. I was kind of going back and forth between putting that song on or this one, but I like this one so much. I like Favorite so much that I had to put it on because it's my favorite, maybe. But they have a new single that they just released called "It's Amazing to Be Young," and that's also worth a listen. I think it literally just came out a couple weeks ago, so definitely check that one out if you find yourself digging this song. And this is a fun track that is for sure not what I would consider traditional Irish music, but it will get your St. Patrick's Day party vibes going. But speaking of traditional Irish music, let's discuss track number 2. So, track number 2 is a song called Take Her in Your Arms by a band called the Fenians. So the Fenians are a band that I discovered through my brother and sister-in-law, actually, who live in Orange County, California, which is where the Fenians are based. They have loved this band since they first started dating and introduced them to me pretty early on, and I fell in love with them too. So this is a band that's kind of been floating around our family since, oh my gosh, mid to late 90s, I would say, late 90s. And they for sure have a traditional Irish sound. And I love them for their use of traditional Irish instruments also. You can hear the mandolin, you hear tin whistles, you hear the flute, some of those things that really come across as being typical Irish instruments, but it's not as banjo-y, I would say, as like a Mumford and Sons or some of the other like Irish folky bands that come to mind. I don't often love those. I feel like if you're gonna bend towards traditional Irish music, I want to hear it sound like traditional Irish music. I don't sort of want a modernized version of. So I think that's what you'll notice on this playlist. I'm either pulling an Irish band or I'm pulling music that sounds very traditionally Irish. I'm not pulling a band that maybe you don't know if they're Irish or not, but their music sounds like a modern version of traditional. No, that's not what I'm looking for. I either want traditional or I just want an Irish band. So yeah, you're not going to find any Mumford and Sons on this week's playlist, or any U2 for that matter. So if you're hoping for either of those bands, sorry, not featured on this playlist. But back to the Fenians. This band has changed its lineup a few times over the years, but one thing I will say is that their live shows are not to be missed. No matter what iteration of this band you've seen, they are great live. They always bring the fun. They are a crowd pleaser. They're family friendly. I just think that they are so great and so fun and kind of an easy, digestible way to get into um, traditional sounding Irish music. Do you know what I mean? They have old Irish standards that they sing, but they also blend in original songs, contemporary Irish tunes. And so I think that it makes it feel like you're getting a well-rounded picture of traditional Irish music because you're getting both ends. You're getting songs that were written, hundreds of years ago in some cases that they're singing covers of. And then you've also got that sensibility behind them creating their own original contemporary music too. So again, this is a band that I think is for sure worth a listen, definitely on St. Patrick's Day, but really anytime you want to bust out the Irish whiskey and have yourself a little party. This band goes well with some Jameson. But I also think that if you are in Orange County or have the chance to see them live in your local town, definitely take that opportunity. Again, this is a band called the Fenians out of Orange County, California, and I have to give a big shout out to my brother and sister-in-law for introducing me to this band many, many years ago. And no St. Patrick's Day playlist would be complete without at least one tune that features a few tra-la-las and a tin whistle. So if the Fenians represented traditional Irish music, this next tune represents a well-loved song by one of my all-time favorite Irish bands, and that is the song Dreams by the Cranberries. This is from their Everybody Else Is Doing It, so Why Can't We album from 1993. And this song is just such a sweet song. Dolores O'Riordan's soaring, clear as a bell voice just makes it that much sweeter. I'm really so sad that she's gone and we won't ever have any new music from her or this band because I just love her voice and I always have. Since the very first moment I heard this album, I fell in love with her sound. I think that I don't know if it's the traditional Irish music influence, but again, even though this song is 32 years old, it doesn't really sound dated to me. This song is from their debut album, which I mentioned. Everybody Else Is Doing It. Why Can't We? And it also featured the song "Linger." I think a lot of people know that song as well. But this whole album is really worth a listen. It was hard to pick just one song for this playlist from this album. It's been with me for so long and is so influential in terms of go-to bands when I'm looking for Irish bands. So for our younger listeners who maybe aren't familiar with the Cranberries, definitely go check them out. Like I said, Linger and the song Dreams were the big hits from their first album. But some of their bigger hits like Zombie came a little bit later. Some of the songs that people might know and recognize were spread across two or three albums that were really sort of their big hit albums. But I think that another beautiful thing about this song is that all of their love songs really are just so sweet. And this is definitely one of them. I think that a lot of Irish music and a lot of songs on this playlist, in case you haven't picked up the themes yet, are about love. I think the Irish love love. They love Irish pride. They love reminiscing about the past. They love telling stories. And maybe that's why Irish singer-songwriters or Irish bands make such rich music that does tell a story or does seem to bring you full circle because of the Irish people's love of spinning a yarn or telling a tale. So I think that that just comes through in the music. And I think that the Cranberries are a really beautiful example of that. This album is one of their classics too. So again, if you're not familiar, definitely take some time with the Cranberries. They are an artist or a band worth revisiting. If you are familiar, revisiting. If you're not, taking a deep dive on. Well, we started the playlist with a relatively new Irish band that I'm loving in Fontaines D.C. And now we're going to close out the playlist the same way. So, my fourth track is from a band that has had a bit of renewed interest this year due to a film that came out about them last summer that features the actual band members. So, rounding out today's playlist is a song called H.O.O.D 25 by a band called Kneecap. So the original version of this song came out in 2019 as a single, and the 2025 remix just dropped in January, and I love it. It's not a huge departure from the original version, but they're different enough that it's worth giving this version a listen. And I think that this is a band worth listening to in general. Obviously, I wouldn't include it on the playlist if I didn't think they were worth a listen. But this is one that kind of caught me by surprise, and I found them through the movie, actually. So I did not know who the band were until I saw the film of the same name. But after watching the movie, I definitely was all in on this band. Um, you will likely need to have the lyrics turned on or at least take a look at the lyrics later because most of their songs are in Irish with some English peppered in. But these songs featuring both English and Irish make them even more exciting to listen to, in my opinion. And so I think, again, out of all the bands included here, this one maybe feels the most authentically Irish because they're literally singing in Irish or rapping in Irish through a good portion of most of their songs. And I referenced it when we first started talking about this song, but I also highly recommend the movie. It premiered at last year's Sundance Film Festival, so the 2024 Sundance Film Festival, and it's loosely based on the real life of the band Kneecap. The band raps in their native Irish language, and they soon found themselves leading a movement to save their mother tongue. They sort of had the belief that a nation isn't a nation without its own language, and they were also inspired by the political activism of early gangster rap and how it brought the mistreatment of the Black community to the forefront, and used the same kind of straightforward, often controversial lyrics to do the same in Northern Ireland. So they found themselves in trouble a lot because they were very much at the forefront of, wanting to get the British out of Northern Ireland. One of the band members' father was an early activist who actually ended up faking his death, at least in the movie, fakes his death to avoid persecution by the British police. So this is a really, I think, part of the Northern Irish story that isn't told as often. I think we all, know about the Troubles, and we've gone deep on that. But this is an interesting sort of side tangent from that time period where you really see this group of people wanting to fight to maintain their language. You know, the British were really trying to enforce Northern Ireland using the Queen's English, and it just felt like something was being taken away from them, at least as it's described in the movie, and at least as it feels, I think, to a lot of folks that I know from Belfast or Northern Ireland in general, that taking their language away was just sort of a non-negotiable. And it's not been until pretty recently, maybe early 2020s, that Northern Ireland finally was able to declare Irish as one of their official languages. So certainly the movement got its start earlier and with the Troubles, but Kneecap is a really interesting perspective. I think a more modern or more recent perspective on how these young rappers really became activists. And the story is fascinating. Like I said, it is a slightly fictionalized version from what I understand. The movie versus sort of what actually in real life happened with the formation of the band and sort of how they got started and how they started performing and things like that. But there's enough, I think, historical accuracy that it's not too far a reach. And it will give you a good idea of how this band started and why this cause was so important to them. And I think it's a great way to close out this playlist because that's really, you know, as we started in the beginning with the lore and some sort of like fun facts about St. Patrick's Day, what St. Patrick's Day is all about in its modern incarnation and boiling it down to the basics is just honoring Irish culture. And so this song seemed like a perfect way to close out today's show. That's certainly what these guys were fighting for in Kneecap, was for maintaining their culture. And a big part of that, obviously, was the Irish language. So give this song a listen. Check out the movie if you're so inclined. I think you'll like it. And you'll also, get to experience what Irish sounds like listening to them rap it as well. I think that's another cool thing about this song is that, you know, the Irish language or Gaelic in general is not phonetic at all. So when you see the words or you see the spellings, I think for English speakers, it's really challenging to understand how you would pronounce those words phonetically. So it is kind of cool to hear them rap in Irish, although there are lots of curse words too. The universal language, the F-bomb, sounds the same and sounds almost the same in Irish as it does in English, but you still get a lot of the Irish language in there as well, which I think is pretty cool. Well, listeners, that's going to wrap up this week's episode. I hope you have some shenanigans with friends and family planned for the St. Patrick's Day, and I hope this playlist helps get you in the mood for some Guinness and corned beef and cabbage. But be sure to follow, download, and share this show. And if you love listening, please share the show with a friend you think might enjoy it too. Last but not least, to stay informed on all things Super Awesome Mix and what are you listening to, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Super Awesome Mix. And please keep the feedback and comments coming to Jenn at superawesomemix.com as well. That's my email. Again, it's JENN at superawesomemix.com. Thanks again for listening, and please join me again next week to find your new favorite song.